All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Odysseyware webinar, Making Odysseyware Yours with Flexible, Customizable Courses. My name is Kelly Norman, and I'm from the Odysseyware marketing team, and I'll be your webinar host for today. Today, we're going to be diving into the teacher authoring tool, which is designed to support teachers in personalizing or individualizing their lessons. Our presenter, Mike Sands, is a longtime user of Odysseyware and very experienced in customizing his own courses or lessons. Before we begin, I do have a couple notes to review. You may have noticed that everyone is automatically placed on mute. However, I want you to know that we are listening to your feedback and we will be accepting questions throughout the webinar. So if you look on the right-hand side, you should see that there's a panel where you can chat in some questions. You can definitely submit questions privately or, so that everyone else can see them as well. That's up to you. Regardless of how, just feel free to let us know if anything comes to your mind, and we're going to do our best to answer all of the questions. So anything else we can't answer at the time, we will follow up with in an email afterwards. And at the end, I have some exciting information about a contest we'll be holding on social media soon. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand the reins over to Mike. Thank you.
Hi, Kels. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for being here and attending. When I was asked to talk about this feature that I use every day that has frankly made my job much more fun and fulfilling, it was kind of a no-brainer. So I really am happy to be here and be talking to you guys. I'm going to go ahead and get on to it because we only have 30 minutes, and I think that's going to go by rather quickly. Oh no, sorry, slight technical, here we go, okay. So, you have to make sure I'm not a Russian bot. So this is really me, this is my school. I'm an English language arts teacher at an alternative school, Falls Career High School. Didn't actually study English directly, I'm a philosophy and rhetoric guy in college. But at our school, it's in Texas, Marble Falls in the Hill Country, just outside of Austin. And it's a school of choice. It's a public school within the school district. But it's a school of choice in the sense that we take applications. Students aren't forced to come here. So there's rolling enrollment, so students are, on different lessons at different times. At any given week, we might have new students enroll. We only have about 50 students, which is nice. It allows us to do a lot of fun things. And we have 3 full-time and 3 part-time teachers. So when we say customization in Odysseyware, there's a lot of different ways to customize your courses. There are, using CRX mode, credit recovery mode is a form of customization. You can borrow lessons from other courses and insert them into your courses. And that's a very handy thing too. But what I'm going to talk about today is pretty much exclusively the teacher authoring tool. So this is creating your own lesson from scratch, essentially, and you can do the same with quizzes and tests and inserting them into your course. Personally, I think it's the most liberating but also the least used feature that Odysseyware has. I really think it's Odysseeware's best kept secret. So what I'll be trying to do today is convincing you that it is the best kept secret in Odysseyware and how it can help your learning, the student learning, but I think not just help the students, in enhancing the learning process. It really makes the job a lot more fun for the teacher as well. And probably the most important thing I'll try to get across is that it's easier and faster than you may think. I've talked to many people over the years about customizing courses and kind of told them our story at Falls, how we customize quite a bit. And the people always think it sounds great, but their concern is that it's just too time consuming. So I'd like to dispel that myth. I think it doesn't have to be as time consuming as you may think. And at the end of the presentation, I'll go live and we'll create a lesson on the spot in just a couple of minutes. Oh, I should point out, I think this is the time during the talk where you're supposed to talk about all the wonderful results you've gotten from using this feature. I think we really have, improved our educational product by customizing our courses so much. But really, all I want to point out is on the bottom right corner here. This shows the number of custom assignments that I've written from scratch. So if nothing else, you get the idea that it's possible to write lessons in quite a few of them. So that I think the number is 1306 right now. So now, obviously, some of them are very simple, and some of them are just copying previous lessons and tweaking them a little bit. But still, it's quite a bit. It can be a huge part of your curriculum. So one thing to do before you think about how you want to customize is, or one thing that prompts you to customize usually is something about your students. Something about your students such that the courses as they are not really doing the job for you. And when I started teaching about 10 years ago, the first thing I noticed really about students was that there was a wide variety of academic sophistication. Some students could, were constant readers and could read, difficult literature, and they could write well and all of this. And others had never read more than a paragraph in their life and, proudly proclaimed that they had never read a novel and never planned to. The other thing was that they just didn't read enough and they didn't write enough. There was a whole lot of multiple choice in their past, and it didn't suit them now. So one of the first customizations I did was to create ways that students could read novels, but still in the Odysseyware platform. I think people that have used Odysseyware could tell you this. The students appreciate the fact that in Odysseyware they can see all of the lessons that they have to do. There's kind of a rundown. I've done 38 lessons. I have 82 to go. This kind of thing. They can see the percentage complete and all of this. So if you do like I did the first year and say, well, I'm going to have students do work outside of the Odysseyware platform, then you will be labeled the devil because you have given extra work. However, if you manage to put the lesson inside the Odysseyware platform, everything's okay. So the trick was that not every student wanted to, or was able to read the same literature. So how can we vary it up? What I did was create just a lesson where the student actually picks from a list of novels. And you can see some of the novels here. This is just part of the list. And I can, push the student towards this or that novel as their abilities dictate. But there's all kinds of benefits came from this, and I'll give you a better idea how the lessons looked. But some of the benefits I didn't even anticipate. One is that, students talk. And if students are talking about, well, the novels they read, which they tend to do when they have to make a choice, they'll ask each other, what should I read? What did you like about the novel? This kind of thing. Then that's always a win, I think. So yeah, let me move on and show you what it looks like. So this lesson is the first lesson where the student actually picks the novel. And what it looks like from the course view is this. So the first lesson is Novel List 2017-18. The student actually picks the novel. In that lesson, there's also talk about, why we bother with novels and things like that. And then there's 10 lessons that just say novel 1, novel 2, novel 3. We do the same thing with dramas, for the record. And what we do is the student is then, after they pick the novel, let's say they pick 1985 by George Orwell, this is a copy of paper questions that I will hand to the student along with the book. And then the student will go to the lesson, and each of those lessons, novel 1, novel 2, novel 3, just have 5 question blanks, essentially, that look like this. So the beauty is that and here the questions are broken into groups of 5. So the beauty is that you have the flexibility to pick the novels that you like. Students are generally happier, but you don't have to do anything different. You don't have to put questions for all of those novels into Odysseyware. And you can see the lessons are not complicated, right, that are written. Another problem with the students is that I've found that oftentimes their work has fallen through the cracks. So they've had this experience where they maybe write something, and then they turn it into the teacher. Some magic occurs, and what the student gets back is a number, 70, 80, 90. And the student doesn't really care, our students generally don't care too much about the number as long as it's high enough so that they can not have to redo the assignment. So one way to keep that from happening, we found, is to make the work more visible. So, for instance, what you see on the left here is a whole unit devoted to a research paper and a presentation based on the research paper. Generally, in Odysseyware as it stands now, research papers are boiled down or concentrated into one lesson or maybe 2. But what we found is that the students skip steps. There's a lot of steps to a research paper, and if we could break those steps up, then we can get better data on the student. How he's doing for each step. So we wrote lessons for each step along the way. I have to say on the right, this is only a little bit related, but this student, as I was taking his graduation picture, was so smitten with his experience of reading Cyrano de Bergerac that he insisted that I take a picture of him with that book. All right, so one of the steps of the research paper process is just to have the student come to the teacher and a couple other students and kind of pitch his idea for how he wants to structure his paper after he's given a day or 2 of research. We found that one of the things the students were doing is they were starting to write their paper before they had done enough requisite research. So we just inserted a lesson saying, okay, well, now tell us the research you've done. What do you know about the topic? And then we can talk about how you're going to structure the paper. This has saved a lot of time. It's made the students' process more visible, and it's given us better data, really, about what the student's doing. If you wait until the paper is written, it's really too late. It's sometimes hard to tell then where the student went wrong. After the student turns in a rough draft, there's another lesson that's inserted, just called a roundtable. So this again is where the student gets together with the teacher. If it's an advanced student, maybe, or advanced maybe isn't the right word, but in certain circumstances, you could have the student just get together with other students and discuss the paper and talk about edits and things that need to happen for the final copy. Again, this is a lesson there's nothing fancy to it. There's just text that I've written, and we throw in a couple of pictures, a couple of questions about the roundtable process, and then on the end there's a question asking what the student got out of the roundtable process.
Test one, test two.
I'm sorry, there's testing going on at the school. Okay. Oftentimes what teachers have said, I mentioned it before, is that, well, I don't have the time to get together with every student, so maybe some of those lessons you think will be difficult. But you can use the available resources that you have. You may not have time to sit down with the student and go over the papers, but you could write a lesson just like this one where the students do it for each other. What I had initially had was a requirement on the paper side that the student go and find someone to help them edit their paper. But there wasn't a lot of incentive for the editor to do a good job. So the solution seemed to be then to write a project that the editor can then get credit for doing the editing. And then there's a number of questions that the editor has to answer about the paper. So it gives me a heads up on what's coming with the paper and helps the editor as well. So blended learning is talked about quite a bit. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions. Of course, there's not a consensus on what exactly it means. But I think it's not just technology rich. It doesn't mean you're just using technology. Rather, I think it refers to the way technology can be used to make a rich educational experience. So with Odysseyware, everything starts at Odysseyware. It's essentially a flipped classroom. That's where the instruction begins. But where it goes from there, the sky's the limit, right? So you can have lessons that instruct students to give presentations, like on the left, or even on the right. We have some dissecting going on and things like that. At any given point in time, you'll see students, of course, with books in their hands. So just using technology doesn't mean you should feel limited to always having the student in front of a laptop. So another way that students, that work kind of slips through the cracks. It's not just students. Oftentimes, I think it's the teachers' work slips through the cracks too. So oftentimes it's because there are multiple steps in a lesson. Steps get skipped by the students because they're in a hurry. Oftentimes the solution can be to just make a lesson for each step. So what we have here is an example of the presentation instructions. It's a whole lesson just on the presentation instructions. The next lesson, or actually it's a project, is the actual presentation. Find oftentimes your good work goes into presenting instructions for the student and they're ignored, and it's a little more difficult to correct that after the presentation's been done. But here you can do it ahead of time. And again, not a fancy lesson, just text and a picture. Here's further along in the same lesson. These things, these expectations for the presentation are reinforced. Again, you shouldn't feel like everything has to be right on the laptop for the student. This is a rubric for the presentations for students that are attending the presentation. And here it's just a paper copy, but it reinforces the expectations that the students should already know. And notice that, as you're customizing, because even this is a customization, that, you can make silly jokes that the students seem to appreciate. If you look under clarity, if you give the person a 2, it's what? So anything to stylize your stylize the work that you're presenting to the students is going to be helpful. That said, there's, this isn't on customizing Odysseyware, but there's nothing wrong with having moments during the day where you actually still direct teach. Again, you shouldn't feel like everything has to be through Odysseyware. Now, you don't want to surprise a student and give them lessons when he thinks everything's there on the Odysseyware format. But what we have at our school is we have about a 10 to 15 minute period after the students break each day where we address the whole school. And it gives us an opportunity to address maybe errors and mistakes that the students are making as a group, or just kind of tips and things like this for difficult lessons that we know are coming. We call it thinking, writing, reading, and composition, or for short, we call it twerking. So another thing about the students that I've noticed at my school is that they tend to see education as a series of meaningless hoops to jump through. And as a result of that, they're uninspired. I think my view is that's where most of the uninspiration comes from, is they just don't see the point. So as a result, a big part of teaching, I think, is convincing the student that it's not pointless. I call this the anti-Mr. Miyagi teaching method. And I stole this idea. It's not mine. Some guys from the LaPorte schools in California came up with it. But if you remember, Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid he's the kind of good-natured teacher, but never tells his student why he's making him do the things he's doing. So he's teaching him karate through having him wax his car and things like this. And understandably, the students get pretty frustrated. We want to take the opposite approach and let students know why we're doing what we're doing. And Odysseyware makes it such that we can just take a lesson at the beginning. This lesson here is actually called Class Strategy and Philosophy, and it tells a student how to be successful in English, why we think that's important, what makes an unsuccessful view of education, and then what makes a successful view of education. And so, students don't always buy into why, your explanation for these things. But I think it's important that students at least realize that you think it's important. And you can do this in a lesson easily. Not just education in general, of course, but students have questions. Well, why do we have to learn grammar? Well, okay, before the grammar lessons, let's put in a lesson that answers that question, because it's a completely legitimate question. I've found that in composing these lessons, where I'm telling them why we should bother with novels or why we should study grammar and these things, that I often come up with new ideas, or I'll research the question and come up with things that I didn't think about. And it helps clarify for myself as well as the students, I think, why this is important, which, is a good exercise for every teacher, I think. All right. The last thing about the students is that, I've found that, man, you really have to prove yourself. They're often unimpressed with teachers. Teachers sometimes treated like a whole different species, and sometimes I think the students are a little bit justified. It's not just students that treat education as meaningless hoops. Every now and then teachers do as well. And so, it's good to prove yourself. One way to prove yourself is to create lessons that put you in a position where you can prove yourself. So we have little kind of mentor groups. Each student is assigned a mentor teacher. And forcing the situation, making a lesson where the student actually is required to go speak to the teacher, gives the teacher an opportunity to, earn that ethos, the authority that he needs in order to convince the student to do good work. Because it's important to remember that the students, they have free will. They don't have to focus on the work if they don't want to, or they don't find it interesting or meaningful. It also gives you an opportunity, if you can read this, to throw in, little jokes that the students often appreciate, even if they're not terribly funny. At the end of the first paragraph here, it says, "It really is in your interest to use up whatever knowledge your mentor has now before he or she gets too old to remember things and is of no use to anyone." Or here are some multiple choice questions that we've written. How much will be done in class? A little. B, lots. C, yes, Coleridge really was interrupted by a man from Porlock. So the more inquisitive students will say, well, not only does C not make any sense, but what's the story about Coleridge and Porlock? And it gives you an opportunity to tell them a story about why the poem Kubla Khan wasn't completed and all of that. So yeah, any kind of stylization, any kind of joke is an opportunity for a conversation with the teacher and the student about the work, not just about baseball, but about the thing that you're all there for. Lastly, I think you build ethos just in the process of customization. So the struggle, I think, is convincing the students to have a reverence for knowledge and skills, that these things are the key to a happy, successful, flourishing life, not just a job, but life. And you may not convince students that is so, but through course customization, the students will at least see that you think that is so. And I think a lot of respect comes our way when we do that. They see, well, here's a teacher that's clearly gone through a lot of trouble for our benefit. He must think these things are important. And that doesn't convert every student to the to the good side of the force, but I think it really helps with the respect factor. Okay, promised a demonstration, and I think I just have enough time to do a quick one. So let me get out of here, and I'm going to go live onto my school's Odysseyware site, and hopefully the students haven't sent me messages cursing me out or anything. Okay, we're good. So let's say you want to create a lesson. If you go to courses and you click on the tab for custom assignments. Now, there are other ways to create custom assignments, but here we're just going to create one from scratch. So I'm going to click on the custom assignment button, and let's say I'm going to do an assignment on The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. Say I just read that story, I want to include it in my lesson, or in my course. Okay, so now I already have the text of The Telltale Heart here, but it's in the public domain, so you can get it online. But I'm just going to copy and paste the text into the top part. And I'm going to go ahead and take this off because the title will show, the title of the lesson will be here. Now, let's say I want to throw in a couple of pictures to make it a little more interesting. The way I do that is I use Photo Bucket. Oh no, no internet. Let's see. There we go. So you could take just pictures off the internet, but if that picture goes off the internet or that website goes down, then you've got a problem. It won't show up. So if you save the picture to something like PhotoBucket, then you can use it anytime because it'll always be up. All right, so I'm going to copy that picture and I'm going to put it pretty high here. So here's my image button. I copy the image, and just from doing this a lot, I know 750 is pretty wide, so I'm gonna make that 500. And notice it changes the height as well. If you wanted to just change the width and not the height, you can unlock it. I'm going to set the alignment to the right and hit OK, and now I have one picture here. And it's kind of a long story, so I'm going to put in one more real quickly. Here's my photo bucket. And I think this one is the one. Let's see. And again, I'm going to make that not quite as big. We'll put it on the right side again. All right. And now the last thing you need is a question, or two, or three, or four, however many you would like. I'm a big fan of the essay question for a number of reasons. One, I just think it gives you the best data possible. If you really want to know what the student thinks, ask them something open-ended. But you have the option for true or false, multiple choice, multiple select, fill in the blank, matching, all of those good things. Before you save the document, you have to have at least one question. So at this point, I could save it. And at this point, I could even publish it and put it in a course. One of the things I really like about this is that even if it's in the course already and a student is assigned to it, this can be blank. As long as I fill this out before the student gets to it, everything is good, right? So on the essay questions, I can change them after it's published, and I can change everything in here too. I just can't change the title, and I can't change the number of questions. You're a little more limited if you write multiple choice questions. Those are pretty much locked in. Last little feature, let's say we write one question and I'm going to have a link in there. We're going to compare the story's theme to, let's say we just read the poem Dream Within a Dream. And I want the student to be able to get to the link to this poem. So we have a link button here. Again, you can put a website that brings the student there, but if you're worried about that website ever going down, you could use Google Docs is what I tend to use. And I'm having, oh, there we go. From Google Docs, I can just copy the link, give the student, or there we go, give the student access to the document, put it here, and now we're golden. So I'm going to save the lesson, and let's take a look at it. So what you see, it's not fancy, but we have quickly put together a story got a couple of pictures, and if we click on this link, it takes us to the poem that we want the student to read. And I think we're good. So yeah, the time, if you're okay with just using things like this, it can be done very, very quickly. Always the time in putting together a lesson is the putting together the lesson part. The technology part is really quite simple. There are other bells and whistles, of course, you can use, but if you just want something quick, it's just that easy, just that easy. All right, I'm going to take us back to here, and I think, oh no, let's see. I think we are done, unless there are some questions, which I would love to answer.
Cool. So thank you. I'm going to go ahead and jump in. We did have a couple questions come in to me privately. But first of all, thank you so much for the presentation. It's always really cool to go in and kind of see how the tech works on, from one side to another. So the first one is actually from Katrina. So she wants to know, if you make your own custom lesson, can you still use like reporting features in Odysseyware? Like how does it help with grading or anything? Stuff like that.
Yes, so Odysseyware has a whole lot of reporting features, and I don't use them all, but yes, my experience has been that everything I've used them for, it comes through the same way. So you can it's going to treat those lessons just like any other lesson. Definitely on the student side, especially, which I think is important. The students, there are some students that think I wrote lessons that I didn't, and they think some lessons I wrote are actually Odysseyware lessons. On their side, and their little, gosh, I forget what it's called, but that wonderful new screen they have where they can see how many lessons they've done and how many are left and all of that kind of thing. That looks exactly the same to them. On our side, yeah, as far as I know, everything's the same. When you pull up the it's called student data, gosh, I forget it, but we run reports that let us know, how many lessons the students have done for the week, what their grade was, on each lesson, and these kinds of things. And Odysseyware treats them just like any other lesson.
Perfect. Okay, and I just have one more. So from Allison, she saw that you can kind of pull in those links and those pictures. She's wondering, what about videos? Is it possible to just link to like YouTube or something like that, or can you attach a video?
Yes, so you can do both. I found easier was linking. I just had more success with it, but yeah, I'm a music guy on the side too, and for fun, I put together well, not for fun. I mean, we used them at school, but I thought it would be fun. I put together a music history class, and yeah, so the only struggle was if the video you use goes down. So if you have a way to save the video, then you're in better shape. So what I had done was I saved the videos onto, I forgot even where I used them. I think on Google Docs, honestly, and then linked them to my saved videos on Google Docs. That way, even years from now, it'll still be there. But yes, absolutely, it's the exact same process. So if you find the video, you just paste in the URL and you're good to go.
Okay, and then we just had one more question from Kristen. She wants to know, is it true, is it still true that you cannot add a lesson to a course once it's been published? So essentially, after a course has been published, can you add or edit anything?
Yeah, so boy, that would be great. I've heard some things are being done that may change, but as far as I know, that's still the case. Um, a workaround I've done, well, I guess there's two things. It just depends on your situation. You can always, of course, just copy the course, add the lesson, and then, for succeeding students coming in, you've got the course that you want. What I've done oftentimes, if I roughly know what I want to do for the lesson, but I just don't have time to fill it all out before, say, it's in the summer and it's before school starts. What I'll do is I have to title the lesson, and I have to decide how many questions I want to ask, as long as I keep them essay questions. And other than that, I leave it blank. And, I can, as long as I get to that lesson and fill it out before the student gets to it, then everything's okay. You can still edit those lessons. So
Okay.
at any given point in time, a workaround could be that you create blank lessons. You'd have to title them something, and then you'd have to determine the number of questions. But you could keep them hidden, right? So that the student doesn't see them. They're essentially skipped. They're there, but the student doesn't see them. And then you can unskip them if the student gets to it, and you can fill out the lesson as you wish.
Cool. All right. Well, I hope that answered the question. Well, that would actually go ahead and conclude our broadcast. But before anyone leaves, I did want to let everyone know that beginning on December 17th, we're launching a fun contest on our social media channels. So we know that sometimes it can be challenging to get money or raise money for class field trips. So we're going to be excited. We're excited to be giving away some prizes to 4 educators or teachers. So if you just kind of keep an eye out on our social media, it'll be Facebook or Twitter, then we would love if you join. You do not have to be an Odysseyware user to participate. We're just kind of trying to show different ways that we can just love supporting those students, whether you're an Odysseyware user or not. Other than that, if you submit a question that wasn't answered, or if you have one that you come up with later, you can see on the screen, I have our email up there for me directly, which is marketingow@odysseyware.com. We also have Mr. Sand's information on there as well. And of course, you can loop me in if there's anything I can help with as well. So if there's anything else that we can get you to reach out, and we'll be happy to contact you or follow up. But really, thank you so much for spending your time with us. I know we're a little bit over our allotted time, but I hope that you got some really good information. All right.